Maryland and Delaware. Two states bordered by the Atlantic and the great bays of the eastern seaboard. States with great cities that tell the story of America's industrial history, while marvels of modern engineering span their bays, and famous tributes to the age of sail and steam. States with a history of terrible division, a land stained with the blood of brother fighting brother during one of the worst battles of the Civil War, and a land of winding rivers and creeks that helped slaves escape to freedom. Away from the towns and cities, Maryland and Delaware offer ridge after ridge of mountains, miles of coastline, and quiet reserves where serenity is guaranteed. They have a shared history and a rich and varied landscape. And although they are among the smallest states in the Union, our aerial journey reveals their giant stature in the history of America. In a daily ritual nearly 200 years old, volunteers raise a giant 15-star flag on a blustery morning in Maryland. It's a replica of the original flag, sewn by widow Mary Pickersgill, which survived a ferocious battle in the War of 1812 and is now enshrined as a national icon in the Smithsonian Institution. On September 13, 1814, the star-shaped Fort McHenry was all that stood between the British and Maryland's greatest city, Baltimore. Against overwhelming odds, the fort withstood 25 hours of bombardment by British warships and a rocket vessel. On a boat on the Patapsco River, a young poet witnessed the battle throughout the night. When he saw the flag still flying after the onslaught, he wrote these famous lines: "Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." Francis Scott Key named his poem The Defense of Fort McHenry. It was later renamed the Star-Spangled Banner. In 1931, it became America's national anthem. During the Civil War, Maryland was one of the most contested states in the Union. Here at Antietam, in the far west of the state, are the somber memorials to the scene of the single bloodiest day of fighting in American history. With a view extending all the way to the Blue Ridge Mountains, General Robert E. Lee gathered his Confederate forces on the high ground west of Antietam Creek as the Union Army advanced from the east. Dawn broke on September 17, 1862, with the roar of 500 cannons. Through the day, smoke filled the air. The old stone bridge crossing at Antietam Creek was the scene of major combat as Union forces tried to take the bridge from the Confederates. Fighting was so bitter on this day, nearly 23,000 Union and Confederate soldiers were killed or wounded. One soldier later wrote, "The whole landscape for an instant turned red." The massive losses halted Lee's advance north and allowed the Union to claim a strategic victory. Today, Maryland remembers the sacrifices made by these young Americans and how a turning point in the nation's history happened on her soil. Maryland is a state defined as much by water as it is by land, separated by the largest freshwater estuary in the United States, the Chesapeake Bay. With its maze of tributaries, creeks, and ponds, the bay covers more than 4,000 square miles, an area so vast it could swallow the entire state of Delaware with room to spare. For centuries, the only way to cross the bay was by boat. But in 1952, a marvel of engineering emerged, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Although many groups opposed the bridge as bringing unwanted development, it provided a fast link between the rural areas of eastern Maryland and the city of Baltimore. Today, 27 million vehicles a year travel under the suspension bridge towers, which soar 379 feet skyward. When the original span opened at a length of 4.3 miles, it was the longest continuous overwater steel structure and the third longest bridge in the world. A few miles west of the bridge, a neat flotilla of dinghies lies ready for training the nation's latest midshipmen. Founded in 1845, the U.S. Naval Academy dominates the city of Annapolis, and shouts of "Go Navy" rally the faithful each fall. Generations of U.S. naval officers have slept and studied within these austere buildings. Annapolis was founded at the mouth of the Severn River in 1649 by Puritans who were fleeing persecution in Virginia. First called Providence, it quickly established itself as a prosperous port for exporting Maryland tobacco to London. By the end of the 17th century, Providence was made state capital and renamed Annapolis in honor of Princess Anne, heir to the British throne. In the center of town is one of the most unique structures in America, the dome of the Maryland State House. Completed in 1797, it's made entirely of wood without a single metal nail and is the largest of its kind in the country. It's thought to be modeled after a church dome in Germany. Around the State House is one of the greatest concentrations of 18th century homes still standing anywhere in America. Heading south, a Navy jet trainer performs textbook maneuvers along the western shoreline of Chesapeake Bay. It's an F-5 Tiger, the same type that masqueraded as the Soviet planes in the movie Top Gun. It's from the Naval Air Station at the mouth of the Patuxent River. Here, young pilots gain their first taste of supersonic flight and target practice on Old Hannibal. This World War II Liberty ship is grounded on the sea floor just 20 feet below. The holes you see in its side come from being riddled with .50 caliber bullets. 70 years old, it's still ready for a few more years of machine gun fire. A few miles southeast of Old Hannibal lies Smith Island, a tiny spot of land in the middle of Chesapeake Bay. Only half of its total area is made up of dry or usable land, and more is lost to the bay every year. 260 full-time residents, most of them descendants of the island's original settlers, still cling to a way of life here that has existed for centuries. Today's islanders still speak a brogue-like dialect that contains remnants of speech suggesting its Elizabethan origins. Over the last century, 3,300 acres of its wetlands have been lost to the bay, the victims of erosion and, scientists say, rising sea levels. For islanders, The days of making a living from the sea around them may soon be gone. With the next big hurricane, the island and its long heritage could disappear forever. The Ash Wednesday storm of 1962 was one of the most destructive ever to hit Maryland. The storm caused millions of dollars in property damage along the state's Barrier Island coastline. As a result of the storm, Maryland decided to protect this 37-mile stretch of pristine beach from future development. It is now called Assateague Island National Refuge. There are no houses here, just campsites. This one becomes a tent city during the summer months. And even though the beach continues to be threatened by storms, thousands of migrating birds still call it home every year. But not all of Maryland's seashore is wild. At the north tip of the Assateague Island National Refuge lies one of the most popular resort towns in the country, Ocean City. Though its permanent population is less than 8,000, it's home to more than 300,000 people on most summer weekends. Located on the boardwalk, Trimper's Rides has been in business for over a century. When Maryland's Chesapeake Bay Bridge was finished in 1952, vacationers flocked here from Baltimore and Washington, D.C. Developers have since built more than 10,000 condominiums close to the water to keep up with demand. But the problem is, Ocean City's famous sandy beach is shrinking. Rising sea levels are threatening the town. Although many oppose replenishing a naturally eroding barrier island, millions of dollars are spent each year to pump sand back onto the beach. And Maryland's sandy Atlantic shoreline isn't the only coastal area under threat. In some places on the Chesapeake Bay, water levels rose 1 foot over the 20th century. Here, legendary explorer Captain John Smith undertook a 3,000-mile odyssey around the bay in 1608. Today, modern-day sailors can follow in the wake of Smith's epic voyage along the first national water trail in the country. In his journals, Smith described the land around the bay as the most pleasant place ever known. On the west side of Chesapeake Bay, Point Lookout is a haven for migrating birds. Built in 1830, the Point Lookout Light stands at the entrance of the Potomac River. The lighthouse was run for 17 years by Ann Davis, the daughter of the light's original keeper, who died just 3 months after taking the job. Point Lookout also served as a Civil War prison. More than 4,000 Confederate prisoners died here under awful conditions. The lighthouse was finally closed in 1965. Now, it's popular with ghost hunters who claim the light is haunted. A few miles to the north, a town looks trapped in time. St. Mary's City was established in 1634. For more than 60 years, it served as capital of the colony of Maryland. But in 1695, the seat of government was moved to Annapolis, and St. Mary's City was abandoned. For 3 centuries, the town's remains lay concealed but preserved beneath fields of corn and wheat. Today, reconstructions of those remains provide unique insight into the values of the early colonists. When they planned their new town, they placed a new church at one end and the State House at the other, evidence of the importance of the separation of church and state for the town's founders. Despite being the capital, few families actually lived in St. Mary's City year-round. They spent most of their time living and working on their tobacco plantations. Today, St. Mary's City is one of the finest 17th century colonial archaeology sites in the nation. And it's still bordered by farmland. Agriculture is Maryland's largest commercial industry today, powered in part by fields of wheat, soybeans, and corn. But for centuries, the only crop growing in fields like these was tobacco. And just as in Virginia, slave labor powered Maryland's plantations. In this Dorchester County field, a plaque marks the birthplace of a young girl born into slavery around 1820. Her name was Harriet Tubman. She would go on to become one of the most celebrated conductors of the Underground Railroad. Even today, the exact routes of the Underground Railroad remain a mystery. But at a time when everything moved by boat, the rivers and creeks along Maryland's eastern shore were key links in the route to freedom. Well-traveled roads were far too dangerous for fugitive slaves, but the rivers and swamps provided safe transport and the chance to cover one's tracks. Tubman came to know the watery terrain as a girl because she was often hired out to neighboring farms. Her knowledge of the backwater trails would later help her guide hundreds of slaves to freedom. One route she may have used was the Choptank River, a water highway that flowed from Caroline and Dorchester counties some 70 miles north, ending within a day's travel to the free state of Delaware. Tubman made her own escape to freedom in 1849. While most never looked back after their escape, Harriet Tubman made the perilous journey back to the South 19 times to lead more than 300 slaves to freedom. By 1856, there was a $40,000 bounty on her head. Tubman became known as Moses, the name given to her by the slave she helped deliver to the Promised Land. Frederick Douglass wrote, "Excepting John Brown, I know of no one who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people than Harriet Tubman." Away to the west of the state, the countryside opens into woodlands and the gently rolling hills of Washington County. The best views of the area can be had atop a stone tower known as the Washington Monument. This rugged stone edifice, the first monument erected in honor of George Washington, was dedicated in 1827, almost 60 years before the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. As a young man, Washington was a frequent traveler here, first in his job as a surveyor, and later as a leader of the colonial army. Moving west, the rolling hills give way to ridge after ridge of the Allegheny Mountains, a landscape of stunning forest still in full leaf. Here, Maryland is sandwiched by West Virginia to the south and Pennsylvania to the north. At one point, the state is just 1.5 miles wide. No other state in the U.S. is so narrow. For early pioneers, these mountains made their journey west tough going. Today, U.S. Route 40 cuts right through these hills and follows the route of the first federally funded turnpike in America. Built in 1811 and called the National Road, it's regarded as the road that built America. The 620-mile highway offered settlers a gateway through the mountains to the fertile Ohio Valley and beyond. The road originated here in the town of Cumberland, on the state border with West Virginia. It came to be known as the Gateway to the West. But in the 1840s, the railway arrived in Cumberland, and the national road was overtaken by the Iron Horse. Cumberland became a major hub of the B&O Railroad, with connections from New York to Pittsburgh. Trains also arrived from Maryland's largest city and the birthplace of the American Railroad, Baltimore. In the southwest of the city by the bay, enthusiasts take the William Mason along the tracks to the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum. This is the oldest steam train operating in the nation. You may have seen it in the Will Smith movie Wild Wild West, painted in black and named The Wanderer. The museum collection sits comfortably within this impressive roundhouse, once the largest circular industrial building in the world. Inside, 15,000 individual artifacts tell the story of America's railroad history, in a city considered to be the birthplace of railroading. Baltimore's history is the tale of a tough port city built by generations of immigrants. Its architecture, a mix of elegance and grit. From the air, Baltimore appears as a grid of tens of thousands of brick row houses. But on the ground, invisible boundaries still define the ethnic neighborhoods established by immigrants who came to work in the shipyards and steelworks. During World War II, Baltimore's Bethlehem Steel was one of the largest steel mills in the world, employing 300,000 workers and producing steel for guns and warships. It was here that the steel girders of San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge were made. But by 2001, demand for U.S. steel was so low that Bethlehem Steel filed for bankruptcy, and its assets were sold off. The Sparrows Point plant now works at far below capacity, but for the moment, steel continues to be made in Baltimore. One reason steel plants and other industries flocked to Baltimore was its port. Ever since the town was founded in 1729, the deep sheltered waters of the Patapsco River have made it an ideal arrival point for cargo ships. Modern container vessels unload their cargo just as they have for centuries. Although the scale today might amaze the city's forebears. Just off the docks, row after neat row of cars and trucks await transport throughout America. Each year, a staggering 500,000 automobiles from around the world arrive here to begin life on American roads. But it's not just cars and goods that have crossed these piers in numbers. After New York, Baltimore was once the second largest point of immigration in the nation. The striking gold domes of St. Michael the Archangel, the church for Ukrainian Catholics, is evidence of just one community that settled here. But over the last century, Baltimore's bustling neighborhoods have fallen on hard times, as jobs and residents have moved steadily away. Today, there are currently 30,000 vacant lots across the city. Some of them were featured in HBO's cult crime series, The Wire, which was filmed in and around West Baltimore. A small 2.5-story house stands out among empty lots and a low-income housing complex. 203 Amity Street was once the home of Edgar Allan Poe. He described his Baltimore brick home as this little house in the lowly street with the lovely name. The Poe House is now a museum. In 1849, aged just 40, Poe was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore and never recovered from an illness that remains a mystery to this day. Stories abound of an unknown stranger who visited Poe's grave for 60 years to leave 3 roses and a partially drunk bottle of French cognac in his memory. No figure stands taller in Baltimore, Maryland's African-American community than the late Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. Marshall was the civil rights lawyer who argued and won the landmark case of Brown versus the Board of Education that ended legal segregation in schools. A native Baltimorean, Marshall received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and the city's airport has been named in his honor. Standing high in downtown Baltimore is the copper-roofed Bank of America building, which rises over 500 feet and was the tallest building in the state when it was built in 1924. But today, it's medical care, not skyscrapers, that are putting Baltimore on the map. The city is home to Johns Hopkins Hospital, which has been ranked the top overall hospital in the U.S. for 20 years running. It's part of Johns Hopkins University, named for its founder, a philanthropist who built his fortune from investments in the B&O Railroad. Ever since the 1700s, the shallow waters of Baltimore's inner harbor have been restricted to smaller vessels. Today, the city's historic docks are finding new uses. One is now the site of Baltimore's National Aquarium. 16,000 animals, from plankton to sharks, live inside these angular glass walls. Nearby, a silent hero emerges. A 19th century ship with a colorful past. The USS Constellation was built in 1855. Soon after, it was sent on a mission to intercept slave ships at the mouth of the Congo River in Africa. Later, she defended Union troops and even carried supplies to famine victims in Ireland. Just a 10-minute walk from the inner harbor, a well-tended lawn marks the home of baseball's most legendary hero, George Herman Babe Ruth, who was born just a few blocks away. Ruth's father ran a saloon known as Ruth's Cafe. Some say that the saloon stood at the exact same location as center field at Oriole Park, the famous Camden Yards baseball stadium. Here, on just about any summer night, thousands of Marylanders rise to sing the Star-Spangled Banner, the anthem that traces its roots from just across the harbor at Fort McHenry. From Baltimore, we travel east to explore Delaware. President Thomas Jefferson is said to have described Delaware as a jewel, a tiny state with great historical importance. The second smallest in the nation, it is also known as the first state because it was the first to ratify the Constitution and so became the first official state in the Union. In colonial times, the state's extensive coasts along the Delaware Bay and the Atlantic made it a tempting location for settlers. A sailing ship moored on the Christina River in Wilmington pays tribute to some of the state's earliest colonists. The original Kalmar nickel brought some of Delaware's earliest white settlers in 1638. Neighboring states were first colonized by the English and Dutch, but the Kalmar nickel and its passengers came from Sweden. Built in 1997 and identical to the original, she can be seen sailing up and down the eastern seaboard, serving as a handsome ambassador of her state. But while some of Delaware's earliest settlers were Swedish, her most famous were originally French. It was here in the Brandywine Valley that Pierre Samuel Dupont de Nemours first settled after fleeing France during the French Revolution in 1799. In 1802, Pierre's son Eleuthère Dupont started a gunpowder factory at Hagley, using mills to grind the key ingredients, charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter. The family's business was so successful that DuPont would later become one of the largest chemical companies in the world, making Delaware a center of innovation for a diverse range of products. At the start of the 20th century, the DuPonts were among the richest families in America. This 102-room chateau was built in 1910 by Eleuthère's great-grandson, Alfred. Named Nemours after the DuPont family's ancestral home in France, the 47,000-square-foot mansion has recently been restored at a cost of $39 million. Today, the mansion's 300-acre estate is also the site of the Alfred I. DuPont Hospital for Children. DuPont is one of the largest chemical companies in the world and has facilities worldwide, but its corporate headquarters remain in Wilmington, Delaware. The state's other traditional industries haven't fared as well. After World War II, many of Delaware's once thriving shipbuilding and steel companies were replaced by empty factories. But in the 1980s, the state's fortunes were turned around when Governor Pierre DuPont passed the Financial Center Development Act, which effectively removed the cap on interest rates that banks could charge customers. Since then, Wilmington has become a financial center for the credit card industry. If your credit card is issued by Bank of America or Chase, chances are you send your payments to Wilmington. The arrival of the big banks helped revitalize the city's waning industrial economy, but economic downturns have brought fresh concerns for its citizens. Luckily, Delaware has friends in high places, and none more than Vice President Joe Biden, state senator since 1972. A resident of Wilmington, Biden resisted living in D.C. for 36 years, choosing instead to commute daily from the city's historic train station. A truck carrying Delaware girders rolls over a famous steel bridge to New Jersey. One of the longest twin-span suspension bridges in the world, the Delaware Memorial Bridge is dedicated to soldiers who gave their lives overseas. The first span opened in 1952, followed by the second in 1968. Just a few miles southwest of the bridge, the bustling modernity disappears and the state's rich colonial past is revealed. The 17th century town of Newcastle is home to 5,000 people. Its historic district spans 3.5 square miles, land first settled by Peter Stuyvesant in 1651, and then fought over by the Dutch, Swedes, and the British, who eventually won. Here in 1682, William Penn, the proprietor of Pennsylvania, first set foot on American soil. Today, a statue stands in his honor on the old village green. In the 18th century, the old courthouse in Newcastle served as the colonial capital, and it was here that the Declaration of Independence was read. George Reed Jr., the son of one of the Declaration signers, built this 22-room home in 1801, intending it to be the largest home in Delaware. The Reed House, as it's known, is surrounded by the oldest formal gardens in the region. Moving south, a marshy island momentarily splits the Delaware River in two. According to legend, Pea Patch Island earned its name when a ship full of peas ran aground here, spilling its seeds and creating a patch of pea plants. But its pleasant name belies its main use, as the location for a fort and island prison. Fort Delaware began as a fortress built at the end of the War of 1812. Rebuilt in 1859, it gained notoriety as a prisoner of war camp for Confederate soldiers during the Civil War. More than 30,000 were interned here, and conditions were so harsh, it became known among Confederate soldiers as the Fort Delaware Death Pen. More than 2,000 soldiers died within these walls. Afterwards, the star-shaped brick building reverted to being a fortress and continued to protect Delaware through both World Wars. It became a state park in 1951. Further down the Delaware River, the coast becomes a maze of rivers, ponds, and marshes. It's a mecca for hunters, but hunting isn't allowed everywhere. Since 1963, more than 10,000 acres of migratory bird habitat is now part of the Prime Hook National Wildlife Refuge. A few miles to the north lies a peaceful place with a violent name. The Murder-Kill River is one of Delaware's great secrets, supposedly named after a massacre of Dutch traders by Native Americans in the 1640s. The headwaters of the Murder-Kill are here at Killen's Pond. This 66-acre mill pond is home to a wide range of freshwater fish, including carp, perch, and catfish. And where there are fish, there are sharp-eyed predators scoping the water for an in-flight meal. Further down the Delaware, the river widens to a broad bay where vast areas of marshland have been spared from development. But what may look like marsh has sometimes actually been sculpted by human hands. These neat rows of ditches date from the 1930s. They were dug to drain the marshes and control the swarms of mosquitoes that menaced beachgoers in nearby resort towns. Lewis is one of the last towns on the bay before it meets the Atlantic Ocean. It was also one of the earliest settlements in America. The Rives Holt House, a former inn, reportedly built about 1665 and expanded in the 18th century, has been called the oldest house in Delaware. The town's location made it a target for 17th century pirates and the British during the War of 1812. Every citizen was required to own a musket and ammunition to help fend off invaders. When the Atlantic storms of winter roll in, the Delaware town of Lewis is as exposed to the wind and rain as any town on the eastern seaboard. But thanks to two dramatic breakwaters just off the shoreline, houses and sheltering ships are protected from the worst of the waves. This is the National Harbor of Refuge, a place where any ship can seek calm waters in times of emergency. Made originally with nearly 1 million tons of stone that had been shipped down the Delaware, the harbor was the first of its kind in the Western Hemisphere. But when shipping got too big to drop anchor inside the old breakwater, a new one was built in 1901. As if to demonstrate the need for such a shelter, the original Harbor of Refuge Light lasted just 17 years of battering The new one was completed in 1926 and made like an old ship of cast iron. Far out in Delaware Bay, a ferry boat takes passengers and cars across the sometimes choppy waters to Cape May, New Jersey. Since the ferry service began in 1964, over 34 million people and 11 million vehicles have made the 17-mile crossing, making a much shorter and more scenic route along the Atlantic coast than the interstate. These waters can be calm or incredibly choppy. Either way, the MV New Jersey and her sister ships are built to weather the seasons, sailing all months of the year. Rounding Cape Henlopen, a string of curious-looking towers line the shore. They are a reminder that Delaware's coastline was once America's first line of defense. Fort Miles was built in the Second World War to help soldiers identify the exact positions of suspicious ships or submarines. They then sent precise firing coordinates to batteries, including this 12-inch gun, which has since been protected by glass walls. Fort Miles was ready for enemy attack, but the attack never came. Its 11 towers are now more than a half a century old and stand as extraordinary sentinels of a world war that never arrived on Delaware's shores. When the weather's fair, the Atlantic shoreline of Delaware offers miles of seaside pleasures. The resort town of Rehoboth, complete with boardwalk, arcades, and saltwater taffy, is a popular weekend retreat for workers from DC and Baltimore. A diverse lineup of musicians play free concerts at the Rehoboth Beach Bandstand, but only during the summer months. To the south, developments line the coast, but then the shoreline opens up to a 20-mile stretch of Delaware's sandy beaches, over half of which are within state parks. Wherever there's development along this coast, there's an eternal battle against encroaching water. Take Fenwick Island, which has an extremely high flood risk. But for many, having the pleasures of the Atlantic at their doorstep is worth the gamble. And when migratory geese can appear to outnumber humans, it's clear that nature reigns in this corner of the state. From its industrial and financial capital of Wilmington to the towns that still cling to its coastline, Delaware is a small state, but rich in resources and the legacies of those who settled its shores. In Maryland and Delaware, the states of a new nation began. At Fort McHenry, an anthem that paid tribute to the hard-fought freedom of its settlers who ventured to cross an ocean by wind and sail. Maryland and Delaware, two states that battled to forge a country's freedom and fought a civil war to keep it united. They are lands of adventurers, entrepreneurs, revolutionaries, and an anti-slavery heroine whose stories are painted across an ever-changing landscape of earth and water.